Beckley, we're after we.
How many people we got in Beckley? I don't see the 3.
What you do last night? 4.
Oh, okay, there you are.
What is this?
No, I still don't see the 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I see everybody now. I gotta have to check my bifocals. I did not grade the test. I will grade it and have it back to you on Tuesday.
Our paper's due the 25th. He never said anything about it. He just take some out first, and then you have to use a case or two.
All right.
About it.
So let's talk a little bit about the video. I liked that video. I think it gave us some insight into what went on in that school shooting in Columbine. But greater, I think it leads into some common threads as we get into some of the information we talk about mass shootings in general. I think it kind of leads into some common threads there. But I'd like to get some of your all's opinion on what you took out of the video when you watched the Columbine video and what you take out of it. And I want you to put on your criminal justice lenses, your police officer lenses, your police chief lenses, and let's talk about it through a police lens, not necessarily through a civilian lens that we know it all affects us, but I want to talk about it through a criminal justice lens. What are some of the things we take away from it? What are some of the things you saw that really stuck out at you?
It was all reactive.
Say again?
It was all reactive.
It was all reactive and very uncoordinated, right? All right, the police response to the whole school shooting was all reactive and very uncoordinated.
And the problem with that is it's not like that was the first ever school shooting. First ever school shooting happened in the 1800s.
Right. And we're going to dive into some more of these. I've got some statistics and things for you we're going to dive into today and talk about some things and some trends. But you're absolutely right. However, even having said what you said, and even with the trends being what they are, a school shooting is still not necessarily a common police response. Even though they've been around for a long time, and even though they are, it is a legitimate threat and something we have to worry and be concerned about, it's not necessarily a response that you're going to get all of the time. It's not necessarily a call you're going to have to answer on a regular basis. But I will go along with you. It's not. The officers, everybody was kind of caught off guard. It was very unresponsive. What else do we take from it? Let's look at the 2 suspects. Let's look at the 2 perpetrators from a criminal justice standpoint. What happens there? What do we find in that situation?
Eric, I think it was that.
Right. So
there's had to be something there that somebody's seen.
One of those young men had a substantial criminal history to be as young as he was, and that doesn't ever get flagged. In fact, somebody calls on him. Somebody calls and reports him, and nobody at the police department did their due diligence, so it kind of falls through the cracks. What else do we know about him? Good. He was on medication. One of the suspects in that crime was taking medication. He was taking a Ambien, I believe is what he was. Was it Ambien? Zoloft. That's what it was. I'm sorry, Zoloft. He was taking Zoloft. And we know that the Zoloft wasn't doing what it needed to be doing, and how do we know that?
Because he was still having the flare-ups and the act-outs.
Well, he was still having the flare-ups and the act-outs, but even at that, about 8 months before the shooting happened, our report tells us he went back to the doctor and confessed to having what? Homicidal and suicidal ideation. Right. And so here we have an opportunity for the doctor to step in and to make some awarenesses and to do some things that they need to do. And he kind of falls through the cracks again, right?
Didn't it say that the doctor just prescribed him a different medication, but it was basically the generic of what he was already taking?
Absolutely. The doctor makes another mistake, and I don't know if the doctor did this through ignorance, or if the doctor did it with not caring, or if the doctor did it thinking that he was prescribing a different drug, not realizing it was just a generic of the same drug. But basically what he did was took him off of the name brand and put him on the generic, and it was the exact same drug, same chemical.
A lot of that was the culture at the time too, because in the 90s, they was handing out those depression medications like the Zoloft and things like that, just like they do the pain pills in the 2000s.
Right, right. And
I mean, I seen a statistic the other day, and it was talking about over 3 million people in the United States in the 90s was on medications like Zoloft.
I can believe that, and probably more. And what the piece you're missing, not you, but the piece that we as a society are missing there is you have medical doctors prescribing psychotropic drugs. And it seems like a mismatch to me somewhere, right? Because a medical doctor doesn't get a whole lot of training in psychological, he's not being trained like a psychiatrist, he's not being trained like a psychologist, he's not. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that when you have a patient who's being prescribed psychotropic medications of any kind, it needs to be coupled with some actual counseling, right?
Well, it goes deeper than that. What it is your medical pharmaceutical companies are controlling what's prescribed instead of the doctors.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that, and we're going down a path that I have no argument with. We're just, the issue is if we're not careful, we're going to get off of where we want to go. We're talking about this shooting, but I completely agree with where you're coming from. I think that the pharmaceutical companies, for them, it's about the bottom line, and they're not interested in people getting better or receiving counseling or any of that kind of stuff. It's about selling another bottle of whatever it is they've got to sell. I'm not real happy with the pharmaceutical companies right now. Anyway, I have been taking a generic medication that I have to take every day, and that generic medication doesn't do what I want it to do. It doesn't do what the name brand medication does. And so I complained to my prescription company, and they said, hey, look, you can go, please feel free. If the doctor writes your prescription for the name brand medication, go get it. We're not paying for it, but you can have all you want. And so my next question is, well, then why do I have insurance? Well, what we do is we do the generic, because generic's the same thing. I said, dude, I'm telling you it's not. I've had the name brand medication and I've had this generic, and they're not the same because it's not doing the same job. It's supposed to be the same milligram and everything, but it's not doing the same job. So I'm a little irritated at all of them, and I completely agree with where you're coming from. But what I want to point out to you is that this school shooting, along with the Virginia Tech school shooting, along with the Sandy Hook school shooting, along with all of the other mass shootings that happened before, have warning signs. None of them just happen. Nobody wakes up one day and says, you know what? Today's the day. We had a mass shooter that got stopped, and I don't know if you all know this or not. We had a mass shooter that got stopped in Ohio 2 days ago. I was telling the class about it last night. I was telling Mr. Primer about it last night. Now, I didn't have a chance to do much more research on it, but basically it goes down like this. A student from Ohio University who has a history of trouble. He's taking medication. I understood him to say he was a hockey player at Ohio. I don't know if it's true or not, but he was a hockey player at Ohio. He's got a history of being in trouble. He takes mental health medications. He goes into a gun store. He tries to purchase a gun, a shotgun. There is a lapse of time between the time you request an FBI approval to sell the person that gun and the time that request comes back. Sometimes it's 5 or 10 minutes if the people running the other end of that FBI check are on top of their game. And if they have a backlog, sometimes it takes 45 or 50 minutes. Well, however long this backlog took, by the time the approval come back and the FBI said, yeah, he's approved to purchase this gun, the gun store owner became uneasy. According to the news report said that the gun owner said he had made vague, veiled statements about hurting himself or someone else. Is that what you understood him to say last night, Mr. Primer? Help me if I get off track, because some of that was a little foggy. We had that conversation so fast. So he made some veiled threats about hurting himself or someone else, and the gun store owner, even though he's got approval from the FBI, says, you know what? I'm not comfortable selling you this gun. I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know which way you're going. I'm not comfortable letting you have this gun, so I'm not selling it to you. So the guy gets really mad. He leaves the store. In just a very short few minutes, he comes back. The gun store owner has the presence of mind to lock the front door. He tells his customers to hide. He calls 911. He loads a weapon. When 911 gets there, this person's already left. He has gone to a Walmart. They have all the information they need to kind of track him down. They do find him at Walmart. While he's in Walmart, he is buying survival gear. Is that what I understood to be the next step? So they detain him there at Walmart. I understand he resists arrest, so they can go ahead and put him under arrest. And they get a search warrant for his house. When they get a search warrant for his house, he's got a .22 Magnum already there with thousands of rounds of ammo. He's got other thousands of rounds of shotgun ammo. He's just trying to get the shotgun to complete the arsenal. And here's where I'm speculating a little bit. I don't know if he wrote a journal or if he had a diary or if he just wrote something at his home, but they found evidence at his home where he expressed an idea that next day after he got the gun, he was going to go to Ohio University and he was going to kill as many people as he could. So we averted another mass school shooting yesterday because of the due diligence of a gun store owner, which, you know, is really, it's really refreshing to me to find a business owner who isn't selling somebody something to make another quick buck and moving right along. You know, this guy was looking out for the bigger picture. Something didn't seem right to him, and he raised some alarm. I think it's wonderful. I think we need more people in our society like him, because he averted, through his diligence and through the police quick action, they averted maybe hundreds of deaths. You know, so the point I'm trying to get across to you about that Columbine shooting and about all of these things is that they don't happen without warning. Everybody's got some sort of a history. Everybody's got something that they bring with them, that baggage, that backpack, you know, that I talk about all the time that they carry. They've got this baggage with them, and there are some warning signs there. Should we as a society pay attention to that? One of the other things that I thought was very interesting, did you all notice the culture? They talked briefly 2 or 3 different times about the culture at Columbine High School. Did you all notice anything strange about that? The jocks wore white hats, and the jocks weren't necessarily athletes. The jocks weren't necessarily athletes. They were the privileged, more wealthy kids of that school who felt like they deserved the best. They were the elite, as though they painted themselves. And they wore those white hats. The rantings and ravings in the journals that both of those boys kept were about the jocks. And the irony of all that is they really didn't target the jocks once they got started. Once they got started killing, the jocks weren't what they targeted. Even though that was the brunt of their rantings inside those journals, which I find interesting. And I bring that up because as we get into these statistics, you're going to find a connection as we get into this next little bit of paperwork that I brought in that I want to share with you today, between why those jocks weren't targeted, even though they were in those rantings. But the jocks were definitely a trigger. And one of the social programs that come out of Columbine that's grown and grown and grown is an anti-bullying campaign. They're trying to identify anybody who's a victim of bullying so that, 1, they can stop the bullying, and 2, they can identify those folks and begin to get them some intervention and begin to get them some help, because it makes a difference. It matters. It's kind of like, I can't remember the Adam Sandler movie. Do y'all remember the movie he was in where he called the guy up and he said, look, I've been really mean to you when we were in high school, and I'm so sorry, and I wish I hadn't done all that. And the guy's like, oh yeah, no problem. I hadn't thought about that in years. And they hang up the phone and he turns around and marks his name off a list.
Yeah.
Where he
When
goes
he goes back to school?
Huh?
When he goes back.
Yeah, where he goes back to school. You know, and the guy's like, yeah, no problem. I didn't think about that. And he hangs up and he turns around and he like scrubs his name off this hit list he's got on the wall, you know.
Ain't it Billy Madison?
That's what it is. Billy Madison, yeah. All right. So, the first one I'm going to talk to you about, this first, I had 3 documents from the federal government that I wanted to give you some statistics and stuff from. And the first one that I opened up, I don't like. I'll tell you why I didn't like it. I thought it was gonna be a really, really good article. I thought it was gonna be something we were gonna be able to use in class. But what happens is, all of the psychiatrists got together and said, if we don't do something to put out some information saying that not all mass shooters and not all shooters, there's no link between mental health issues and mass shootings, all of our patients, there's going to be this stigma around mental health, and we're not going to be able to get our patients in, nobody's going to do anything. So that article was on mental health and mass shootings, and during that whole article, all they did was argue that there was no link between mental health and mental health issues and mass shootings. No identifiable link. And while I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that, I do believe that in my experience, the problem with the logic of that article is we as a society do not have a big enough mental health safety net, right? There should be a bigger mental health safety net. We have people in our society who walk around every day who end up going to jail, who didn't need to go to jail. If we'd intervened early enough, they could have got some psychiatric treatment and they'd have been just fine. They could have been productive citizens. But because we don't have a big enough mental health safety net, we don't catch these folks early enough, and consequently they end up breaking the law and going to jail. I seen a 65-year-old man who had dementia. There was nothing wrong with him except he had dementia. But in his dementia, he was convinced that his next door neighbor was trying to fence off his land and steal all of his land. Instead of our society intervening and getting him the help he needed to deal with the dementia and those types of things, because he didn't have any children, he didn't have anybody to watch out for him, you know what they did to him? Put him in jail. They arrested him. And they said, well, he's out of society's way, now the police can deal with it. And the police is even less equipped to be able to deal with mental health inside a correctional facility than is the general public, right? So this man didn't ever get any treatment. What he did was, he was a retired coal miner who mined coal all of his life, and in his retirement years, up in his 60s, he began to get dementia, and instead of treating that dementia and trying to make sure that his quality of life was good through the end, they put him in jail. Because that's just what they think everybody needs, is to go to jail at least once. So this first article I'm going to talk to you about is a combined effort from the U.S. Marshals, the FBI, where they take a look at mass shootings. And the first thing they do is they tell you that mass shootings and an active shooter are one and the same. Okay? Mass shootings and an active shooter are basically 2 different descriptions of the same event. An active shooter is a situation in which a shooting is in progress.
Can you repeat that?
Yes. Let me move my microphone so y'all can hear me a little better. An active shooter is a situation where a shooting is in progress. Now, different aspects of that active shooter scenario require the police to respond differently. The police are not going to have the same response at a school that they would at a mall or that they would at a private business. So know that the response may vary somewhat. But if you're responding to an active shooter, the thing that's going to dictate the variance in your response is where it is and why it is. Is it in a park? Is it in a school? Is it in a private, a closed business without public access? Is it in a mall with all kinds of public access? That's going to dictate more of a police response than is the fact that it is an active shooter. We're going to respond the same to the active shooter portion. So, this study looked at 160 active shooter incidents from the year 2000 to the year 2013. Okay? They looked at 160 active shooter incidents between 2000 and 2013. What they used for their information was police records, FBI records, and what they termed open sources. I would take that to mean eyewitness testimony.
How many?
160. So they used police reports, FBI reports, and what they termed open sources. And like I say, I termed that to be eyewitnesses. This report is used as a baseline for federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies to learn how to train and respond to active shooter incidences. So here's your snapshot. Today's got a lot of facts and figures in it, because I think they're important for you to understand where it come from and where it's going to. I'm not generally big on facts and figures and all that kind of stuff, but in this situation I am, because I think it gives us a really good opportunity to look at where it is and where it's going to and what it is inside our population. Out of 160 active shooter incidences, that averages through the test period from 2000 to, what I tell you, 2013. From 2000 to 2013, the average was 11.4 incidences a year. 11.4 a year. Which, as we talked about with you all in Beckley, even though it happens, 11 incidences a year is not, and this is covering not only school shootings, but all mass shootings or all active shooters. That's not really a significant number. The total casualties for the time period that we looked at was 1,043, not 11,000. Excuse me, I about made a mess of it. 1,043 casualties. Of those, 486 were killed and 557 were wounded.
How many were killed?
486.
Okay.
And 557 were wounded. Now, some of those who are wounded in this situation for the purposes of this report may not have actually been struck by a bullet. They may have been hit by flying debris. They may have fallen. They may have gotten trampled by someone else. But somehow as a result of that situation, they were injured, whether they were shot or otherwise, right? So know that most of them were shot, but there are some incidences in here where the people got, one person got ran over by a couple other people. They turned to try to get away and just flattened him and hurt him, broke his arm and some things. So you have some of those, but not many. Most of these people are shot. You have a couple of people that were hit by flying glass. All right. Of these incidences, 40% of them fell under the federal definition of mass killing. Which is an event where 3 or more people die. During that time period, there are the 2 highest casualty incidences. Can you all think of which 2 they were? They're very popular.
Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook was 3rd. Virginia Tech was 2. What was number 1?
The theater in Colorado.
Good. The Aurora, Colorado theater shooting was number 1. Tech was number 2, and Sandy Hook was number 3. Now, I want to get into some of the characteristics of the shooter. I'm sorry, I told you wrong. Number 3 was not Sandy Hook. Number 3 was Fort Hood. Do y'all remember Fort Hood?
Yeah.
Number 3 was Fort Hood. And number 4 was Sandy Hook. I apologize.
Back Mountain Mental Hospital down there.
So now I want to talk to you a little bit about the characteristics about a shooters. And I want you to pay particular attention to some of these characteristics, because I think they tell us something about these shooting incidences. But now that's up for you to decide. I want you to give me the feedback. Tell me if you think so. The first characteristic about these shooters are, in all of these incidents except for 2, the shooter was a single individual. One person. In 10 of these incidents, out of the 160, in 10 of them, the shooter first shot and killed a family member. In 10 of these incidences, the shooter first shot and killed a family member. There would have been 11, except one of these shooters couldn't find the family member he wanted to kill. They were hiding, and he couldn't find them. So after he gave up, after he couldn't find them, and just started killing random people. In 6 of these 140 incidences, the shooter was a female. In 6 of these 160, the shooter was a female. So that tells us that the majority of these shooters are men, right? In 40% of these incidences, 64 incidences, no, it's in 40%, 64 incidences, 40%, the shooter committed suicide. Excuse me, the shooter committed suicide. 64% of these incidences, the shooter committed suicide. 64, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not talking very plain today. I've had a head cold for days and it's killing me. I've been taking that Mucinex tablet, and it seems to be helping a little bit. The problem is I could stand up here and go to sleep after I take that thing. Man, it's killing me.
The thing with Mucinex too is if you take it for a few days and then stop, it'll all come up.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, I don't need it
That's
up.
how I've had
What
it.
I need is right here. I feel like I've got about a 40-pound bucket of cement right here. That's bad, ain't it?
Yeah.
At least 5 shooters out of 160 incidences remain at large. What does that mean?
Haven't been caught yet.
Haven't been caught yet. They did escape.
5 shooters remain at large.
40%, what was that? The last one.
40%, 64 of the incidences, the shooter committed suicide. And at least 5 shooters remain at large. Now I want to break this down for you. They divided this up into 7-year pieces. This study was 14 years, and they divided it up into 2 7-year chunks. During the first 7 years of the study, there were 6.4 incidences that occurred annually. So the first 7 years of our study, we had 6.4 incidences annually. The last 7 years of our study, there were 16.4 incidences annually. Oh, okay. The last 7 years of our study, there were 16.4 incidences annually. 16.4 versus 6.4.
Does it give you an age statistics on the perpetrators there?
You know what? It does, but I don't. Let's see. There's my statistic on the wounded. I'll be honest with you. It gave me an age statistic on the shooters, and I did not bring it with me because it wasn't one of the things I was going to talk about, but I can have it for you on Tuesday. Basically, though, the age range was about 30 to 45 was where most of your shooters were. I think they had one shooter who was 66 or 67, and then you had a couple in the 55 range, and then you had a bunch down here in this 29 to 45 range, and then it slacked back off. You had most of your shooters went, you had some that were high school age, like 16, 17, 18, and they were a good sized group, but they weren't your biggest group. But I can bring you those statistics for sure on Tuesday. I will do
I was
that.
figuring the biggest group would be 16 to 35.
Well, if you lump that's a large section of population to group together. They really kind of broke it off at about 26.
Smaller groups.
Yeah, into 3 different groups. They were almost like adolescents, middle, adults, and then older folks. And the surprising number is that the people who were doing most of the shootings were right about 30 up to about 45.
Midlife.
Say again?
Midlife age.
Midlife, yeah. But I'll bring you that for sure on Tuesday because I've got it. I just didn't bring it. All right, here's something else that's hugely interesting, that's important.
Sir, I got a question.
All right.
As far as the suicide went, are you referring to them putting a gun to their head and shooting themselves?
Yes, they committed suicide.
Okay, so you're not including the ones that suicide by cop, because that's how a lot of these turn out at the end.
Well, according to your statistics, most of them turn out with suicide before the police get there.
Okay.
There are a number who end up getting killed by the police, but that statistic's a little bit later, and I don't know if we'll cover it or not. What I wanted you to understand is that, and what I'm hoping you get out of these statistics and pull out of this, and that you bring out that we can discuss, is that most of these people have no intention of being taken alive. Whether they take their own life or whether the police take their life, they have no intention of going to jail. The bulk of them know that they're going to die in this incident, and so they take their own life. There are those who force the police to take their life, and then there are 5 out of this 160 who figure it out, who planned it out well enough to actually get away, right? But the bulk of them end up taking their own life at that, and that's, I think that tells us a lot about who, the personality type, if you will, of our active shooters. Does that help you? All right, here's another piece of information that's really, really interesting, that really is going to let us into the mind of these active shooters and helps us out a lot. 70% of these active shooter incidences end within 5 minutes. 70% end within 5 minutes. What does that tell you about police response?
Pretty quick.
Even if it's dang quick, chances are you're not going to get there in 5 minutes. You think about it. I can't go, and I know you guys in Beckley don't understand this, but right over the hill here is a Burger King that I like to go to almost every day for lunch. It's like I'm addicted to the place. I weigh 500 pounds the time I quit working here. But anyway, I can't leave here, get in my car, leave here, and drive to that Burger King with normal traffic and be there in 5 minutes. I can't do it. And it's not 6 miles, 5 miles. I mean, it's very close. So if the average shooting happens for 5 minutes, police really don't factor into this shooting as a response, right?
No.
23 of the 160 shootings ended in 2 minutes or less. That fast.
What's your percentage on that?
It was no percentage.
23 incidents.
23 incidents.
Can you repeat the whole thing?
Yep. 23 incidences out of the 160 ended in 2 minutes or less.
I think average call to response time, or response time is like 3 minutes. When a call comes in at 911, it's to get them there within 3 minutes of that call.
I don't see it happening. I would say you're probably in reality, you're probably right. If they get there in 15 minutes, they're doing great. Because you're thinking about in Mercer County, on any given evening, if they got 3 deputies out, they're doing good. 4 is a lot.
Well, I think she's talking about the same thing in Giles, when a dispatcher takes the call.
Yeah.
It's the goal of the communication center to get it out within 24
Oh, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'll go along with that, yeah. And that's a chore. When you get a call come in like that, and your phone's ringing off the hook, to be able to take that information, put that information in the computer, assign it to a unit, and get the unit on their way in less than 3 minutes, that's really saying something. I'm sorry I didn't understand you, but yes, thank you for the interpretation. You're probably 100% accurate. I'd say it takes 3 minutes just to get off the phone and get the officer on his way. Realistically, it probably takes 15, 16 minutes for the officer or take the call off his radio and then actually physically get there. Yeah.
Another thing you gotta account for there is that's not a normal call. That takes a little more prep than just rolling up on the scene.
Right. Especially if you get shots fired, number of suspects unknown at Mercer Mall, at JCPenney's and Mercer Mall. How do you respond to that as a single officer? You're going to roll in there and you have zero information other than shots fired.
When you dispatch all the units.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have backup coming, but look, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to take just a minute and tell you a little story about me. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, they gave a call out that there was a green 4-door LTD riding in Tazewell. Man was supposed to be, he had assaulted his wife, supposedly, and supposed to be armed and dangerous. All officers used extreme caution. I was in Springville. I wasn't even in Tazewell. I thought, got this made. I ain't got to hit this guy, I ain't going to find him. He's in Tazewell. The Tazewell town officers will get him. If not, there's 2 deputies down there looking for him. They'll find him. I ain't got a thing to worry about. I'll just keep on serving my papers, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Minding my own little business. I go around the curve in Springville on a 2-lane road, and guess who goes by me the other way? That green LTD. I said, crap! So I turned around on him. I flipped on the blue lights. I hollered for backup. Now, I hollered for backup as I'm turning on him, right? My nearest backup's probably 11, 12 minutes away. I wait as long as I can to flip on the blue lights, trying to give them time to get to me so that I'm not at this stop with this supposed armed individual. I flip on the blue lights because he's getting ready to make a mad dash for it, and I don't want to be following him without the blue lights on. He just thinks about it for a minute, slams on the brakes, pulls over to the side. I put my car up in park, and I step out of the car. He jumps out of his car and starts back toward me. Now, just so happens, this green LTD has to be containing somebody that I kind of know. He knows me much better than I know him. And he said, Scott, I don't have a gun. Bless you. He said, Scott, I don't have a gun. So my response to him was, I never said anything about you having a gun. Because now you've got my attention, right? How did he know? And so we end up hashing that whole thing out. He got arrested for assaulting his wife. It turns out he didn't have a gun. But you can see how that information comes to you, and you can see how you find yourself very alone in a scene like that, right? And so what I was trying to get to is you get a call, active shooter, Mercer Mall, JCPenney's. And you roll up into JCPenney's, and just so happens your luck's like mine, and you're the first person there by 8 minutes. And so you've got 8 minutes that you're trying to, you have to do something. You have a duty to act, but you're completely by yourself, and what is it you're going to do? And so there is a time period when you are a police officer, when you are responding to a very dangerous call, when you are very alone. And how you handle yourself during that very alone time can make the difference between life and death, is what I'm getting at. Does that make sense? Yes.
What would policy say to do in that situation? Go in on yourself or wait for backup? Up to different departments?
There's not going to be a policy on that because they're not going to tell you to go in, and they're not going to tell you to not go in because there's too much liability if they write a policy like that.
So is that within your discretion?
It's going to be within your discretion. I would think.
Get in trouble for not going in? I mean, if it's that type of situation.
Well, I mean, you may not necessarily get in trouble for not going in, but what's going to happen is it's just like the police at Sandy Hook. One of the critiques that the citizens gave at Sandy Hook was the police didn't do anything. Those 2 guys were in the library firing shots, 2 officers standing outside a propped open library door listening to the shooting and won't go in. What kind of critique are you getting at that point? What kind of critique is the police department getting at that point?
So you're saying that would be less understandable because it was pretty equal, 2-on-2, but if it was 1-on-2, it would be.
We're gonna get into that a little bit deeper. One of the statistics that I have in here is how these gunmen were stopped. And as these gunmen were stopped, every time a police officer is involved, gunmen die. Even if it's 2 on 1, gunmen die. Because of the training, because of and see, that's been my argument all along about civilians carrying firearms, and that's what, we've all talked about it, and we've all kicked the ball around. I promise you, if you've never been in a shooting situation, and you've been in the military, you may have, I don't know, but if you've never been in a shooting situation, everything changes when they shoot back. It's easy to shoot at a paper target and say, I'm a good shot. Life changes when the target shoots back. Okay? Everything gets different. Police officers and former military people seem to be the ones who hold it together during that situation and maintain their accuracy. Civilians, and I'm just critiquing what the data tells us, civilians by and large do not keep their cool and do not continue with their accuracy once they realize that they're being shot at. And having been in that position, I'm going to tell you all something. When a bullet goes by your head, it makes a very distinct sound. It's kind of like a whistle. And it will cause you to evaluate where you are and what you are doing. It's an understatement, yes, but it's the best way I know how to describe it. When you hear the whistle of that bullet go by you, you begin to evaluate what is going on in your life and why you are where you are and doing what you're doing. And so things change when they shoot back. And I think you find that the reason you are trained as a police officer the way you are trained is because they expect you to be in those types of situations and handle your business. The public expects you to be in those types of situations and handle your business. The state trooper that just died in Virginia, kudos to him. I hate that he passed away. It's a tragedy we lost. Virginia lost an excellent state trooper, up and coming, very bright young man. But in his defense, this is one of those situations where he did everything right. He did everything by the book. He did everything the way he was supposed to be doing it. And it just didn't, he lost. It didn't work out. But he was brave until the end. And when he died, he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. Exactly the way he was supposed to be doing it. And I have nothing but praise for him. There are some police officers who get lackadaisical and lazy and get killed because they get comfortable. And I have a little critique for some of them, but not him. He was doing everything the way he was supposed to do it. He was doing exactly what he needed to be doing. And I know that's a little off course, but do you get what I'm saying?
Yep.
They put you through a lot. When you train with a weapon for a police department, you will shoot more than 1,000 rounds inside of a week, maybe more than 2,000 rounds inside of a week. And then you do that annually. You shoot, 300, 400, 500 rounds every year annually at targets. You are well trained. At one time, and I'm not saying this because I'm bragging, but at one time I had done so much shooting on the range that they give you a target, that looks like a person. It's got the head and the shoulders and stuff. I could literally put my group so tight on a 55 round range that I cut the center out of that target and you could not count my rounds. I cut the whole center out. You couldn't, the range master would go through and he has to account for every one of those rounds. On a 55 or a 60 round range, he has to count 60 rounds, 60 holes in the paper. You can't count, so you couldn't, you probably could now. I've not done it in so long, I'm probably terrible at it. But back when I was training and all that, you couldn't count 60 rounds because I shot a hole. I ate a hole out of my center of my target about that deep. And I'm not bragging, that's just how much they trained me, right? Anybody could do it. There were lots of people who were better shots than me, but anybody could do it because it was just how much they trained you, it's how hard they pushed you.
Pistols are a lot different in the world than rifles. They're very tough to get used to. I just started shooting pistols a couple years ago. No, I was an excellent shot. I was a 4-year expert with a rifle, and then shooting a pistol, you know, you can apply the same techniques to it.
But it's not, and what you need to do is have somebody who knows how to shoot a pistol and knows what to tell you to do. I don't claim to be an expert, but I think I could probably, especially since you've got that history with a rifle, if you're willing to learn, I could probably show you, make you a really good marksman with a pistol. I took a lady who was at my last job who couldn't pass the range, and she went and bought 3 boxes of ammo, and we went to the range, just me and her, and I worked with her on her stance and her grip and her sight picture and stuff, and I helped her pass the range. She passed the range with a 90%, you know, and just in a couple days practice. And not that I'm a good teacher or anything, it's just that I there's some tricks that I was showed. I was trained by a special ops person. He was a United States Marine, Vietnam veteran, special ops. You know, that's all he did was the black ops stuff. And he could use a long gun, a short gun, whatever, and he really gave me some insight into shooting different weapons that has been very beneficial to me as far as being a police officer. But let me get back on track. One of the things that they point out with these police shootings being so short, with these mass shootings being so short, is that because the police basically don't factor in, one of the things that we're going to have to do is to train civilians to make life and death decisions and train them how to evaluate potentially dangerous situations. For example, used to be when all this first started happening, they told you, one of the training scenarios they told you is never fight back. Hide, right? When it first all started, they tell you hide, lock your door, hide, do everything you can, and don't fight back. That was one of the first training things that they told civilians. Now they've completely changed that. They tell you, if you are in the presence of an active shooter, fight back with everything you've got. Throw a book at them, throw a pencil at them, throw your book bag at them, charge them, whatever you have to do. So that's how the training has evolved for civilians inside a mass shooting or active shooter incident, right? They've completely reversed their original policy on hide and don't fight back to fight back with everything you've got at your disposal. Of the 160 incidences, 107 of them ended before the police arrived. Now there's another number there. Some of these incidences, the police arrived, and once the police arrived, the shooter killed himself. But they still say the police were on scene. So that's why that number is a little lower than what you might think.
You said 107.
107. %, of these incidences, or 25 out of the 160, 15%, were at more than one location. The shooter at Sandy Hook killed his mother at their home, then went to the school. 2 locations. I am really surprised that the 2 Columbine shooters did not kill their parents before they went to the school. Wow, that scared me. Of the 160 incidences, 90, which is 56, ended on the shooter initiative. In other words, he either stopped shooting or he killed himself. police didn't stop it. He either stopped shooting or he killed himself. In the rest of those incidences, or in the other of those incidences, and it doesn't give us a number, the shooting was over because of actions by citizens and or law enforcement. Now here's where we're going to get into something that you all were talking about the police, the police shooting and responding to those versus civilians. 21 incidences, or 13%, ended after an unarmed citizen restrained the shooter. Ended after unarmed citizens restrained the shooter. 3% ended after an armed individual, citizen, not law enforcement, exchanged gunfire with the shooter. Yep. 3%, 5 incidences, or 3%, ended after a shootout with a civilian. Of those, none of the suspects, none of the shooters were killed. None of them were killed. In 2 incidences, 1%, off-duty police officers engaged the shooter. In both incidences, the shooter died. You need me to back up? Did I go too fast? If I did, I'm sorry. You need me to repeat anything? So, I think that just tells you. Here's what those numbers break down for me. The majority of citizens don't carry handguns. They don't carry weapons. So that's why your highest number, 13%, was stopped by unarmed civilians. Because most civilians don't carry handguns. Of those who do carry handguns, they were able to engage the shooter, and they were able to stop the shooter, whether he was wounded or whether they just caused him to engage and then he stopped shooting and fled or whatever. But they were not able to kill him. Of the 2 incidences that involved police officers, both suspects died. And that tells me that the civilian shooters were not as highly trained as the police shooters, right? I mean, statistically speaking, of course, we don't know until you get into that situation. But statistically speaking, yes.
Speaking of those, after the Sandy Hook shooting, there was a lot of talk about having teachers in the schools being armed, and they'd be trained almost as well as a police officer, if not as well as a police officer.
Right.
Do you think that'd be a good idea?
Me personally?
Well, if they're not receiving the same training with those stats, then I think it'd be pointless.
Right. I don't see that it would, because you're talking about taking a professional person who's a teacher's mentality is not the same as a police officer's mentality, right?
Mine's different.
Especially elementary school teacher. They're about nurturing and love and supporting and helping, and it's hard to take someone with that mentality and put them on the firing line and give them the same training that you're going to give a police officer whose job it is to protect and to serve and to keep people safe, and because the mentality is not the same. And so I don't think that you're effective in doing that. I think it's the rare individual who can work inside the school system and be proficient with a firearm to that degree. As we go on with this, and we may not get there today, we may have to continue the conversation next week, but as we go on with this, one of the things that they talk about is target hardening. And I think that's where, especially in schools, and I think that's where our best defense lies with school shootings in particular. Now, there are certain things you can't target harden Mercer Mall, but just so much, right? Because it's a public place. But you can target harden a school system or a school building substantially if you will take some certain steps, in which we're going to talk about as we get into that. But you bring up a valid point. me personally, I'm not a fan of arming a teacher because I don't think you're gonna get the results that you want to get. However, I'm not completely against it because I do realize that there are some teachers in different parts of the country who may be the exception to that, not the rule, who might be a good person to have a weapon. And I would even go so far as to say if you were very diligent and you went through your school system, through a school building, you could probably pick out 1 or 2 teachers here and there that would be appropriate to do that with, but I think they're few and far between. And again, because of that training element, I'm just not sure you're gonna get the same results with any civilian that you would with police or military. Because it's our job, it's what we do, we spend a lot of time on that firing range. It's one of the things one of the reasons that I told you I helped that young lady to get her to pass her firing range, they were going to fire her if she didn't pass. It was a requirement of her to be a good marksman to keep her job. They were literally going to fire her, and she was very upset. And I hate to see anybody get fired. So I took time out of me, I took my time and didn't get paid for it or anything and helped her with the firing range so that she became proficient and she was able to pass. The same pressure is not put on a school teacher to do that, I guess is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? They'll say, well, you shot 75%, that's good for school teacher. Well, that's not good for a police officer. It's not good for an army. But that's good for school teacher, good, we'll put you in a classroom. No, if you're gonna be in a classroom with my kids, you need to shoot 95 or better, And I think that's the way most people feel.
That's like the lady that was in that video, that was substituting or something.
Right, yeah,
She reacted better than most of the rest of them, even the principal.
Right. And again,
Immediately something was wrong.
anytime you're in a situation like that, I will tell you all as police officers, as civilians, as whatever it is you're doing, anytime you're in a situation like that, those who survive that type of situation are those who keep their composure, those who keep their head. If you start to panic while everyone else around you is panicking, you become part of the problem, not the solution. Keep your head, use your cognitive ability, come up with some alternative solutions. Now, that doesn't happen overnight. That's the reason you go through police training. That's the reason police training is so rigorous. They train you to quit freaking out and keep your cognitive ability and think about things. And not freak out. Because when you freak out, when you start panicking and everybody else around you is panicking, you're just now part of the problem. Right? That's one of the things that I was really proud of my little girl. I've been preaching that to her. She's 12, and I've been preaching that to her since she was real little. She used to throw a fit. Everything that happened, she'd just freak out. And I would tell her, you can't do that. Because if you do that, you're going to get hurt. You have to keep your head. You have to keep your mind. You have to think about things. Well, she was on a school bus with an impaired school bus driver. She didn't freak out. She didn't lose her head. She didn't sit and cry. She called 911. Then she called her mother. She said, we got to do something. This woman's hit 2 cars and a telephone pole.
That's the latest one?
Yeah, that was the
I had
latest one.
Before.
Yeah, no,
There's been 2.
it was the first one of the 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the first one. The first one was like last year. This one's the one that just happened. Yeah, just like a month ago.
Yeah, I used to be a school bus.
And, my little girl, the bus didn't stop. The bus hit 2 cars and a telephone pole. She backed up from the telephone pole and she kept driving. And my little girl convinced her to stop the bus. My little girl helped, called 911, got the police there, and my little girl helped the other kids off the bus. I thought she did well keeping her composure, but it's not something that she just inherently learned. It's something that I've been fussing at her about since she was like 5, right? Stop freaking out. Think about this, right? And so she finally, after all that was over, she put her arm around me and she said, I'm starting to get it, Dad. I said, well, thank goodness, baby. I didn't know. She did really good. All right. Even when law enforcement arrived quickly, the shooter still chose to end his own life 17 out of 160 events, or 10% of the time. Now here's something else we're going to learn about the shooter at this moment. The shooter oftentimes carried explosive IEDs, Mazel Tov cocktails, and body armor. Y'all know what a Mazel Tov cocktail is, right? Everybody knows? Mazel Tov cocktail would be some type of accelerant in a glass or breakable container with a lid and a wick stuck down in it, usually a rag that's lit. And they throw it, and when it busts, you get a fireball. Made popular, the name should tell you when it was made popular. Mazel Tov cocktail is an Italian phrase made popular by the mafia in the 40s and 50s. Yeah. Yeah, they like to blow up cars doing that.
What was the third one you said?
I'm sorry. Yep.
I got body armor.
IED, Mazel Tov cocktails,
Body armor.
and IEDs.
Pipe bombs are a big thing in school shootings, aren't they?
Yes. Yes. And that's what they mean by IEDs. They're not calling them pipe bombs anymore. Anything that's not a conventional bomb is now called an IED. And they've lumped every pipe bombs and bombs in the mail and all that stuff. They've lumped them all in with IED. Anything that's not a conventional warhead, really, they're calling IED now. Or I guess they wouldn't call it IED if you just blew something up with C4. It would just be C4. But anything else is considered to be an IED. All right. 15% or 24 of these cases out of these 160 shootings because they were at more than one scene could have been or should have been evaluated. They should have been evaluated, the initial scene should have been evaluated so that they could have determined or helped determine who it was and where the next scene was going to be and how they were going to interact with the shooter.
50% was not.
I'm sorry, did I say, it was 15%, yeah.
Was not, they didn't do the investigation properly at the first area?
Well, what happened was they didn't tie the two scenes together till after the incident. What happens is they don't tie the two scenes together till after the incident.
And in a few of those cases, they didn't find the second scene till after they was both over.
Right. A lot of times what you have is you have a situation like they did in Sandy Hook. They didn't realize the shooter in Sandy Hook had killed his mother till they started backtracking. And when they got to the home, they found her dead. So they didn't even realize she'd been killed. Till they actually got started on their investigation. All right. It's 5 after. This is a good place. We're going to start on Tuesday by breaking down locations of the shootings. Any questions before we quit today? Questions. Is this information helpful to you all? Do y'all like this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, we have a test, how is it gonna work out the street?
I'm not going to call them. It's not that.
I got that.
This probably will be one of the harder tests you've taken, though, in this class.
And it's just, I know, I'm gonna get a lot, I never showed up.
Did you see him the other day look at me? I told him everybody's test was going to be multiple choice or true and false except his, and his was fill in the blank. He come over here and he looked at me and said, "Dude, are you serious? Is mine really going to be fill in the blank?" I'm like, "Kenny, sit down. You know it's not going to be fill in the blank. Sit down." I freaked him out.
Oh,
He
I'm
thought for
sorry.
just a minute.
The bad part is he could be freaked out, but he'd probably still do it.
Well, yeah, but I just thought it was funny that he thought somehow I'm going to punish him by making him do a fill in the blank test, right?
I know.
I'm like, "Dude, people better sit down." We didn't go far, he left his stuff.
Hand on the car. Crush stuff, put in your water. Still not carbonated, but. No, I think I have to go to Warner about my schedule. gotta do our schedule.
Beckley, thank you all. See you next week.
Yeah, this is.
Have a good one.
When do we have to have schedules done?
Say again?
This week? Are we doing schedules? Next
Yes, yes, they are. You could have early registered last week, but it continues through this week.
week? I sent Butch an email in.
He is, he's in a, kind of a conference in Charleston.
Okay.
He won't be back till Monday.
Sandy, okay.
Okay.
Remember,
Well,
I told you
he's
we
been
had-
gone
we
by all
needed-
week.
Remember, so we. Lily usually just gives me my number. Mine gets to the point, I'm running out of options.
What are we gonna do? Oh. Yeah, you take that test, right? Well, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do.
Yeah. He said Lily's on. Ow, hello. It's a nice little talk.
Wow. And his daughter's alive?
That might not, that's what I was asking.
Is it, that I can see? That's what Degree Works has, but of course, you know, I'm gonna check it with the book, and I printed everything out yesterday. I just haven't got to it to go through and like mark out